Well, good afternoon. Welcome to my studio here at Fabulous Las Vegas. This is Dean Tenney. I will be doing a lecture today to add to our Series 24 playlist. The channel is organized by various series exams. You find the playlist for your exam, and there usually is a couple narrative lectures in there, a practice final, and an explication of test content. Thank you, Series 24, as those are the years who I've helped pass their exam. I started the channel a year ago, and I believe that part of the success has been 24s knowing it's safe for work and content is reliable, and have referred their new team members for their SIE, get some help there for their SIE, their Series 7, their 66, and now we are towards the end of the first year of the channel, and we have some people that are matriculating that the 66 is not the last leg of their testing journey. They are going to go on to a 24. So I've opened up a 24 and a 910 playlist. I've also opened up a R Series 7. Well, I already had the R Series 7 Reddit group, but we now have a 24 Reddit group, R Series 24. And that's for both 24s and 9s and 10s. And this will be the second narrative lecture. I did one on trading and market making. This will be on net capital, fiscal responsibility. And then I'll start next getting some of that text explication done. It'll be a while before we get a practice final for a 24. But, the journey of a complete playlist begins with the first lecture. All right, let's get started. So as I mentioned today, we're going to be talking about net capital fiscal responsibility as it relates to the Series 24. And that's what the game plan is. In the late 60s, we shut down a lot of broker dealers and couldn't find the monies and securities of the customers, and public confidence in the securities industry was seriously eroded. And we said, those bankers are onto something. Those bankers got that sign on the door that says FDIC, and that makes people feel warm and fuzzy about leaving their monies and monies at the bank. If we had a sign like that on our door, people would feel warm and fuzzy about leaving their stuff with us. And so in 1970, we passed the Securities Investor Protection Act. And that's where a lot of these fiscal responsibility net capital rules come from. This is kind of what's behind the SIPC sign. If you don't meet these fiscal responsibility rules, a trustee is going to be appointed to liquidate your firm. So all right, so net capital basically is what should be left over if the SIPC trustee shuts down the broker dealer and pays off the customers. Net capital is kind of like the forensic accounting, if you will. What does the broker dealer look like debt? And you can get a lot of questions by thinking, okay, what would a SIPC trustee think about this? I mean, because as your financial operations principal, I'll play your financial operations principal. I'll play your Series 27. So I'll be the Series 27 to your Series 24. And what I'm basically doing is preparing our broker dealer to be liquidated on any given day. And a SIPC trustee doesn't want to look at selling things that, that are difficult. What it amounts to, I think it's almost easier to just think, what are allowable assets? It's cash and securities. So these are things that are not readily sold by a SIPC trustee, and therefore they're not going to be allowable. Real estate, exchange memberships, furniture, unregistered stock. Remember, unregistered means there's not a market for the place for this security, and as a SIPC trustee, I won't be able to liquidate it. So what that leaves left is the allowable assets that are liquid, and that mainly means cash and securities. Now, on your test in 24, you get recognition. That's just aim and shoot, point and click stuff you either know or you don't. I wish there were more practical application on 24 than there actually is. There's not a whole lot of that, like market value maintenance I'll share with you today. And then judgment, judgments are, you get to 50-50 and then you got to figure out, what's going on. So mainly this is recognition. So, the SIPC trustee is going to have to liquidate our inventory. So as a financial operations principal, I'm going to take haircuts on inventory positions. So for example, if I have $1 million in inventory, that's called tentative net capital. Tentative net capital, let me put that up here. Let me get my annotation tool going. It's kind of like learning a foreign language. And as I mentioned, part of this is, can you have a conversation with a FinOp? And so tentative net capital means before haircuts. That's what that means, before haircuts. And so if I say I have $1 million in common stock before I haircut it, when I haircut, it's tentative net capital. I haircut's going to be 850, for example. Again, recognition style test questions. Some firms do what we call firm commitment underwritings, an open contractual commitment. People are not as familiar, I think, as they probably think they are. But Morgan Stanley did a firm commitment underwriting for Facebook. That's called a bought deal, not testable BOGHT. And that deal was wobbly. They're asking Zuckerberg, well, you don't seem to be very concerned. He goes, well, the way I understand an open contractual commitment, a firm commitment underwriting, that's $38 a share. And whether I get that from an investor, I get that from Morgan Stanley, it's 38. So $38 a share, firm commitment. In a firm commitment underwriting, an open contractual commitment, whatever we don't sell is going to go into our inventory. And so the haircut on an open contractual commitment, this is stock that shows up in the inventory because we couldn't sell it, like Facebook stock, for example. That's going to be a 30% haircut for initial public offerings in a firm commitment or open contractual commitment. As your financial operations principal, I'm not a big fan of firm commitment underwriters. I prefer, as your financial operations principal, a best efforts deal, because then there is no liability to the broker dealer if we don't sell securities. So you can, say that, gee, as a broker dealer, I prefer that. Now, if there's less than three market makers, what I think is a financial operations and principal in SIPC, everybody's around town is going to be having the same conversation. I say, listen, if one more person falls off the screen, I think we talked about a level 3 NASDAQ data feed in our trading and market making lecture. And so there's three people on the screen and I'm taking a 15% haircut. So if one more person falls off that screen, it's going to be a 40% haircut. It kind of makes sense. And the reason it makes sense is because, if we get shut down and I'm the guy left, I'm going to reduce my bid dramatically because I know the SIPC trustee is going to be liquidating the securities. Again, this is recognition. I have it here on the slide as 1, 2, 3, 4, but you should be prepared to see that as ABCD, undue concentration. If I have any one inventory position that exceeds 10% of my tentative net capital before haircuts, for example, I have $600,000 in tentative net capital. And, I times that by 10%. And that means if I have any one position that's more than $60,000. Now, obviously it doesn't apply to treasury securities because that'd be a great thing to liquidate. We're talking about stock. And let me get a different color here. It's not that you have to do this. This is recognition. I'm just, showing it to you real quick. But so let's say that I have an inventory position of 80,000 bucks. So I do have a problem here, right? I have undue concentration. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my original haircut of 15%. And let's see, let me get my calculator. 80,000 times 15%, that's 12. And then on the amount that exceeds, now I don't have to take a hit on the whole thing, just the amount exceeds. The amount that exceeds here is 20,000. So on the 20,000, I've got a new computer here. I'm not very happy with this annotation tool as compared to my last one, but anyways, that's 20,000. Let me fix that. So on the amount that exceeds, I'm going to take another haircut. So I'll do it over here, 20,000 times 15%. And that means 20,000 times 15. You're not going to have to do this. I'm just giving you a general idea. It's 3. So my entire haircut on this position is going to be 15,000. My original haircut, and then on the amount that exceeds the haircut equal to 100% of the original. And again, that's just recognition style questions. Subordinated loans, very testable. So subordinated loan, subordinating meaning the lender is subordinating their claim to the customers and is telling the SIPC trustee that if my broker dealer gets liquidated, that money can be used to pay off the customers. When I started, my firm was called Gamma Global Investments, and half my capital was subordinated loan. So I said, listen, I'm starting this broker dealer. This broker dealer is going to be solving one of your problems. And so I'd like you to make a subordinated loan to the broker dealer. And you're subordinating your claim to, everybody else. And that's why I get to count it as part of the net capital of Gamma Global. So I'm going to put up half in equity, and then you're going to put up half in the subordinated loan. You're a lender to the broker dealer. A very testable minimum term is 1 year. It has to be in written form. On the 24th, they ask if anything has to be in written form. The answer is always yes. It has to be for a specified amount. Now, not low probability, but until we get it approved, we have to have filed with FINRA 10 days prior to the proposed effective date. But until we get it approved, it's actually part of aggregate indebtedness. It counts against us. And that's to give us an incentive to get this thing approved in a timely fashion. Now, a secured demand note agreement is a subordinated loan that takes the form of securities. It takes the form of securities. This broker dealer is no longer with us. I came in the business, there were 8,000 member firms. We're down to 3,700 last time I checked. A lot of time people think it's more trouble than it's worth to have a broker dealer. Not all it's cracked up to be. Anyways, I don't want to rain on your parade, because maybe you're taking a 24 to start your own broker dealer. Start your own broker dealer, you got to have two principals, and one of them is going to be a 24. Anyways, she started out as a broker at Smith Barney, and like that, and then she starts her own broker dealer. Why not? She called it Llama Securities. Her name is Alice Walton of the Walmart fortune. So, fellow 24. I doubt she's still active as a 24, but her firm was called Llama Securities. If I had to guess what a large amount of the net capital of Llama Securities consists of, my guess would be it was a subordinated loan from Alice Walton to the broker dealer Llama Securities. And my guess would be further, this is just hypothetical, I don't know this to be true, but hypothetically, I would guess that it took the form of fully paid for securities in Walmart. Now, if I were her financial operations principal, I would want to carry that at a very low value, so I don't ever have to call, Alice and say, hey, Walmart's gone down and I got to get more collateral. That makes sense. It's got to be fully paid for, because where the idea here is these securities are going to be sold to pay the customers by the SIPC trustee. So it makes sense and testable to know that if we're going to have a subordinated loan that takes the form of the lender pledging securities rather than money, it's going to be fully paid for securities. And if the value of that collateral declines sharply, we notify FINRA. Sometimes we lose deals not because we're any less competent than anybody else. We just don't have the net capital. Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan, Bank of America can be very pushy, because what they can do is go to the issuer and just buy the deal. Not a test term, but a bought deal is where they do the firm commitment deal, right? Say, listen, you come with us. As far as you're concerned, those securities are sold. Wow. I only did best efforts deal. I said, well, listen, I'm going to do my damnedest to sell the securities at Gamma Global, but my broker dealer isn't going to, be on the hook for any liability for unsold securities. So in this firm commitment underwriting, we might want to puff ourselves up. So I always use a lot of these rules and things are arcane because they come back from the days when we were partnerships. I don't know, but many of us are partnerships anymore, but the vast majority of broker dealers used to be partnerships. And when a lot of these rules were written and came to fruition, we were partnerships. Edward D. Jones, I think, is still a partnership. But anyways, for illustration purposes, the corporate finance men and women say, Dean, we're tired of losing deals. We went ahead and did a firm commitment underwriting. I said, well, I wish you would have checked with me, because, that's going to cause our aggregate indebtedness number to go up and our haircuts to go up. And, because we're really, whatever we don't sell is going to go into inventory, and I'm going to be taking 30% haircuts on it. So let's have a partners meeting after market close today. So I say, partners, I've taken the liberty of photocopying the statements of monies and securities you have here and elsewhere. On the top of that, you'll see a temporary subordinated loan document. About to put the firm on steroids, net capital-wise. I'm going to puff us up. I'm going to make us look much bigger than we are. Now, corporate finance men and women better get this done in 45 days. Test question. The maximum duration. Now, when I say something's a test question, I don't mean verbatim it's a test question. I just mean expect testable content around that area. So, if I were a test taker, I'd say, yeah, but, that's one of the challenges, by the way, on the 24. A lot of this kind of stuff. By the way, it doesn't have to be partners. Could be, a rich company parent or somebody who likes us. I highly recommend Chuck Schwab's memoir, Invested. You know, he has a discussion in there about getting a subordinated loan for long term. By the way, the technical distinction is subordinated loans like this are for long term capital. This version is for short term capital, can only be used in underwritings. That's testable. So, you know, if I'm your FinOp and we're having like early warning, you say, whip out one of those temporary things. I said, well, man, you must have missed that. You know, it's going to only be used for that. Once the corporate finance men and women find out about temporary subordinated loans, man, they're in love. And they're going to call their meeting, say, hey, Dean, we know the drill, man. You know, I said, well, kudos to corporate finance men and women. This is our second. We're only allowed to ask question 3 in a 12-month period. Again, we have to copy that file with FINRA 10 days prior to the effective date. So there are 3 ways the most egregious sin you commit. So we've talked a little bit about what net capital is. And the most egregious violation you can have of fiscal responsibility is a violation of net capital. There are 3 ways to violate net capital. We're going to talk about all 3 of these levels of net capital, and you have to rise and meet, you know, whatever the highest one is. Now, what I mean by a hard dollar amount is that this is the net capital, in theory, what should be left over after we pay off your customers. So we're going to find out it might be 250 grand or 100 grand or $1,000,000, 25 grand, 50 grand, 5 grand. That's what I mean by hard dollar amount, whatever that dollar amount is, that represents, again, what would be left over if your broker dealer was liquidated and the customers were paid off. Because in theory, that means there'd be no claim to SIPC. Very rarely does a broker dealer struggle with, you know, coming up with 100 grand or 250 grand. What gets broker dealers into trouble is aggregate indebtedness to net capital. What we can owe customers and others, I'm oversimplifying, but that's my job. Aggregate indebtedness, what we can go customers and others for every dollar we have in net capital. This is the one that typically gets people into trouble. And then we have a temporary subordinated loan, a long-term subordinated loan. As part of our capital, we can't have debt to equity exceed 70% for more than 90 days. You know, I paid off the guy early. He said, why you pay me off? I said, because if I don't have a subordinated loan, then there's only 2 ways for me to run afoul of these rules. Now, violations of net capital, as I mentioned, are the most egregious sin you can make. And that would require that you make immediate notice to your DEAs. Your DEAs. Now, what I mean by that on the exam, they don't want to continue over and over and over again to say FINRA and the SEC. So they'll refer to them as the designated examining authorities. And so you need to make immediate notice on those. All right, so let's talk about the hard dollar amount. Let's talk about the hard dollar amount. So if you're a carrying or clearing firm, you know, it's kind of like learning a foreign language. Let me clean that up. I appreciate your patience with me. Now, I don't know how long it's been since you took your 7. Could be, you know, it's 24 land. It could be, you know, years and years ago. And, you know, I would remind you that to clear a trade, you need to have an order department, a purchase and sales department, a margin department, a cashiering department. That's what it takes to clear a trade. So if you have those 4 departments, then you're a carrying firm carrying customer accounts, also known as a clearing firm because you can clear a trade. And the minimum capital for a carrying or clearing firm is 250 grand. This is recognition, aim and shoot, point and click stuff. I have it again as 1, 2, 3, 4. But on your exam, you could expect this to be A, B, C, D. Now, prime brokers provide custody and financing for hedge funds, institutional, you know, investors, where they have a centralized account. And so I say, hey, you know, I'm going to do this trade with you, but settle up with my prime broker. Now, if I'm a clearing firm and a prime broker, for example, Goldman Sachs is both a clearing firm and a prime broker, it's always going to be $1.5 million. So be careful on the exam. If you have more than one standard of net capital, you have to rise and meet the highest standard. I say to you, I'm again a hedge fund, and I have a prime broker, Goldman Sachs, and you're, you know, BTIG, let's say. And I say to you, listen, nobody has a monopoly on ideas. And so if you give the idea to me, I'm going to make sure you're compensated for bringing that to me through either a markup, or if I'm selling a markdown or your commission, I'll make sure you get paid on that. So I'll execute the trade with you and then settle up with my prime broker. So my example, BTIG is an executing broker dealer, and they would have to have $1 million net worth. or $1 million in net capital. So again, this is aim and shoot point click. Now, remember, if BTIG is both an executing broker dealer and a prime broker, then goes to $1.5 million. So a market maker, there's going to be a floor, a minimum of 100 and a maximum of $1 million, a ceiling. I think of it as a floor and a ceiling. I was tutoring at 24 and she said, Dean, I'm really good on the math. So what does this really mean? Because she could take the number of markets by, 10 stocks under 5 or less or times 1,000, or, 20 stocks more than 5 times 2,500. And she was coming up with the right number. What I said is, if you do that math and you come up with less than 100, it's 100 grand. And if you do that math, and you come up with $1 million, it's going to be $1 million. Now, on the actual exam, I would tell you that the vendors really, I think actually you do things for 24 that you're not allowed to do. I mean, you're supposed to say, I'm not in charge of net capital. The reason there's exam questions on this is because the test assumes you're not a registered option principal, you're not a muni bond principal, you're not a financial operations principal, but usually the 24, the person running the firm is a 24, and all those other exams or registrations answered to you potentially. So you have to have a general understanding of fiscal responsibility. So we'll say, oh yeah, I remember that from my 24. That was a bad thing. So a fully disclosed or introducing broker dealer. So here it's fully disclosed to my customers, Gamma Global Investments as introduced to Pershing, or Gamma Global Investments as introduced to National Financial. So fully disclosed means it's on the statement, introducing that, it says introducing you to the clearing firm. I used to use this as a competitive thing. I'd say, listen, I can't steal what I don't touch. I don't have your monies and securities. The clearing firm does. So there's 2 versions of this fully disclosed introducing broker dealer. They are testable distinctions. So you say, hey, Dean, can I come down to your place and you'll take care of getting my monies and securities to the clearing firm? I say, no. I said, I told FINRA and the SEC that I would not accept customer funds and securities. And that's why my net capital standard is much, much lower. As you can see here, it's $5 grand. Now, if I say, yeah, come on down. Every night I have an overnight UPS going to my clearing firm. And we, get that out every day for you. Come down, have a cup of coffee. Let's talk about your portfolio. That's going to be 50 grand. Now, the other testable distinction between the 5 grand and the 50 grand is 5 grand can't be involved in firm commitment underwritings, whereas the $50,000 guy can. The firm that's a $50,000 fully disclosed introducing broker dealer can be a member of a selling group in a firm commitment underwriting. Whoop. You just want to do mutual funds. All you want to do is mutual funds. So when you come to your FINRA membership interview, they say, well, there's 2 ways to do mutual funds. We understand you want to set up a limited broker dealer. You only want to do mutual funds. One way to do that is through application only. You're going to, fill out the applications and the check off to Franklin Templeton Fund Distributors. That's 5 grand. And you say, well, no. I want to be able to wire the money. I want to speed up that process. And then, well, if you're going to do wire orders, people are making checks to your broker dealer. You present more risk, and that's going to be 25 grand. So we're talking about the 3 ways of violating net capital. We said there are 3 ways of violating net capital. We talked about the hard dollar amount, whether it's 100 grand or 250 grand or 50 grand. The second way we're going to discuss you could violate net capital, we said those are the biggest sins, is aggregate indebtedness to net capital, what you owe customers and others. This is the one that usually gets people into trouble. So you just need to know these ratios. For an established firm, I can owe customers and others $15 for every dollar I have in net capital. I can have $15 in aggregate indebtedness for every dollar I have in net capital. Now, as a first-year firm, I can only owe customers and others $8. I can only have $8 in aggregate indebtedness to every dollar in net capital. Now, remember the other first year that's not part of this lecture or discussion, but remember the other new rule for a first-year firm is all their sales literature advertising has to be submitted to FINRA 10 days prior to first use. So, when you're doing your exam and you hear first-year firm, you go, oh, okay. And then, as people increase the AI increases, net capital requirements can increase, right? Every time somebody opens an account and they send in 20 grand, let's say, that's customer credit balance. That's 20 grand we owe that customer. That's going to cause our aggregate indebtedness number to go up. And we said the third and final way you could do this is through, again, a violation of that subordinated loan. So let's just make up one here. And so let's say that I have $1 million in net capital. And let's say I have a subordinated loan of 80,000, 800,000. That would be 80%. And if that is for more than 90 days, that too would be a violation of net capital. Well, we said if you don't meet these standards, the whole point of these rules, we don't meet these standards. Hello, SIPC trustee. SIPC trustee will be appointed to liquidate the firm. One of the largest shutdowns in quite a while was Bernie Madoff Securities. So a SIPC trustee was appointed. His name is Irving Picard, and he calls the Madoff Securities customers. It says, what would you like to hear first, the good news or the bad news? The good news is you're not going to lose any more money down here at Bernie Madoff Securities. The bad news is I can't find your stuff. I think that the account statements he's been sending you are wholly fictitious. I do not think any of those securities positions are real. I'll verify that because that's what I do. I first verify the records. By the way, I got it out of sequence here. I would know that already because first thing I do is verify the records, and then I notify the customers. And then I, distribute any property clearly identifiable as belonging to customers. And then I handle any remaining SIPC claims. By the way, I would know that. I probably should add a new slide here about that sequence, right? I verify the records. I notify the customers. I distribute property, and then your general credit for the amount that exceeds. So your coverage is 500,000, of which no more than 250,000 can be cash. For amounts that exceed your general creditor, the account is valued when the court petitioned to appoint the trustee. So I say is Irving Picard, trustee for Bernie Madoff Securities, SIPC trustee. I say this could work to your benefit or your detriment. If the market value of your account goes down from this date, that's going to work to your benefit. But if the market value goes up from this date, that'll work to your detriment. You say, well, what about my debit balance? I say, well, it's a net equity claim only and a margin account, so you're not going to have to pay back the customer. Now, if you were using a clearing firm and you get shut down, you're using Pershing or National Financial, or I think it's now Hilltop. It used to be Southwest Hilltop as a clearing firm. You just become a customer of those firms. And, they'll just call one of their other correspondents and say, hey, how would you like a bulk transfer of, 20,000 accounts? A lot easier to shut down a fully disclosed broker dealer. So how do we report this stuff? How do we report our fiscal responsibility? Through what's called a focus report. Now, you don't need to know FOCUS stands for Fiscal Operational Combined Uniform Single Report. Thank God. But that's how we're going to report that. And we're going to file a FOCUS 2 either monthly or quarterly for a clearing firm. Again, you'll know because the DEA is going to tell you. And I would know that FOCUS 2As are done by non-carrying firms. Monthly requests are required by FINRA. So, it's embarrassing, but, the person who worked for me said, Dean, we're in violation of capital. I just told the regulators, I go, oh my goodness, the DEA is. I said, I pay more attention than that. Are you sure? We would have a huge amount of aggregate indebtedness when we close deals because I got to pay brokers, and long story short. So the easiest solution is to get paid and you pay them right away. But long story short, what she had accidentally done is grabbed the wrong template from her laptop and used 8-to-1 instead of 15-to-1. So we weren't in violation, but I had to call everybody back and say, hey, embarrassing, but we're not. And I'm not surprised. FINRA District 1 is where my firm was. They said, Dean, until further notice, said that to us monthly. So aye. Now, once a year, the FOCUS is audited by a public company accounting oversight board accounting firm. This is an accounting firm that has been approved by the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board to do accounting for broker dealers. So you just can't use any accounting firm you'd like to do this. But once a year, the FOCUS is going to be audited. And that's done within 60 days of year end. Hopefully the numbers match. Again, I'm not an accountant, but I'm the 27 at Allowable. And my accounting firm says, Dean, numbers aren't matching. It's not material. It's not a big deal, but, it looks like we're going to have to do some accounting here to get this thing up to snuff here. And so we asked for an extension, and FINRA granted that. So now it's 90 days instead of 60. Well, I kind of hinted at one of the things I didn't like my accounting firm telling me. I don't think I should have to count aggregate as part of my aggregate indebtedness, what I owe my brokers. And the reason I don't think I should have to count that as part of aggregate indebtedness, because it's very clear to my brokers that if I don't get paid, they don't get paid. So when we close a deal, until I get paid, it's a little bit of a problem because I don't get to count the receivable, but I got to count the payable. So who cares? Except I was told by my accounting firm and FINRA that no, Dean, that's part of aggregate indebtedness. So, what I might be tempted to do is shop around and find an accountant who will tell me what I want to hear. And so if I terminate my accountant, I have to tell everybody within 15 days, and then I have to give them a dispute within 24 months. I just told you I had a dispute about whether this counts as part of aggregate indebtedness or not. And, I need a letter from the old guy and new guy saying they've talked and everything's copacetic. Well, there are other things that require notice. I wish that they would get together and make this all the same. Now, remember, we've already discussed that a violation of net capital, you're below the 250, you're below, whatever that hard dollar, 100 or million, whatever. You're over 8 to 1, you're over 15 to 1. Your debt to equity exceeds 70% for more than 90 days. That we already said that's immediate notice to your DEAs, FINRA and the SEC. So what are some other things that require regulatory notification? They don't ask you rule numbers, but this is Rule 17A11, reportable events. And so the books and records aren't current. You make immediate notice. By the way, trial balances must be done monthly. So again, if you're not current on your books and records, if you're not doing your trial balances monthly, I definitely know the trial balances need to be done monthly. We have a material inadequacy in our accounting system. We're not quite sure what's going on, but we can't figure it out. That's again within 24 hours, and a follow-up in 48 hours what we're doing to fix it. Early warning, we go below 120% of our net capital number. So 120% of 250 is 300. So 100%, 20% of 250. We'll assume I'm a carrying or clearing firm. My minimum net capital dollar amount is 250. 120% of that is 300. So I have 280. I'm not in violation, but I am an early warning. So net capital falls below 120% of whatever that dollar amount. If I'm a market maker and I'm required to have 100 and I got 118, 120 is 120, 118, I'm not in violation. I'm an early warning. I have an AI, aggregate indebtedness, net capital greater than 12 to 1. Again, we make a notification within 24 hours. We have to do a quarterly securities count. So we count the securities. Yep, all here. Now, if we count the securities and we're missing securities, that's called a short securities difference. We're missing securities. Again, the SIPC trustee, if he shuts us down, we're missing securities, is going to have to go into the open market and buy in the missing securities to give to the customers. And so it makes sense that we got to create a reserve for that, meaning that money would be available if necessary to close out this missing securities by buying the missing security and giving it to the customer. It must be bought in after 45 days. We can't have this open on the books for more than 45 days. So if we can't find this security, then we're going to go and buy it and put it in wherever it belongs in terms of a location. Now, again, from an accounting perspective, whether or not I'm under or over, it's a problem. So long securities difference is I count the securities and I go, oh my goodness, here's 1,000 shares of Tesla, and boy, I don't know who it belongs to. I guess it belongs to me. I got more securities than I thought. Now, from an accounting perspective, you probably should leave that alone because you're probably going to find out later that, you don't have a free 1,000 shares of whatever, that it belongs to a customer. So if you don't sell it, which is the smart thing to do, just keep it and say, I think it's going to, play out later on. Then you don't have to do anything. But if you sell it, then you got to take a hit for your net worth because the assumption is you're going to find out later you shouldn't have. I use the example of the restaurant my clients and I financed. And, if we come up over in the door, we're closing down the restaurant, and I'm 200 over. If I were prudent, I would put the $200, leave it in the register and say, okay, well, tomorrow when I'm bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and go over this again, I'll probably find out that that's not a free $200. So, that would be the prudent thing to do. But if I say, hey, now that we got the restaurant closed, $200, let's go have a cocktail. And I'm going to find out I probably need to make that good the next day. So, again, securities are a little different because it's not like cash, but if you thought of it as cash, right, it'd be, I'm under in the door. My bartenders used to drive me nuts with this, right? They shouldn't be under in their the cash register, and they shouldn't be over. It should match. It should match. So the reserve account computation every week at Friday, I think the best way to think of this is Friday. So every Friday is a financial operations principle. I'm going to determine what I owe the customers versus what they owe me. So money is owed to the broker dealer by its customers, debits. Money's owed to the customers by the broker-dealer's credits. Again, don't get too much in the weeds here, but debits, the obvious one here is the margin account, right? In the margin account, the customer owes me money. I, the broker-dealer, have extended a loan to the customer. And on the credit side, there's others, but the biggest credit one would be the cash in the customer account, right? The customer credit balance is cash, and we tell them every quarter, test point, that they have cash in their account, quarterly statement, it's available on demand. Almost always, the broker-dealer is going to owe the customers more than the customers owe the broker-dealer. And again, I think the way to think of this is we do it Friday, and then Tuesday morning, within 1 hour of the bank's opening, we're going to make that deposit. Now, again, a lot of times 24s see this money, and it could be hundreds of millions of dollars. And you say, can't we be a little more aggressive than that? I say, well, as your FinOp, you must have missed that on your test. All that can be in there is cash and qualified securities. I mean, that qualified means govies, government securities. If we don't make the deposit, we make immediate notice. Now, if we want to do it monthly, we can do so. But if we want to do it monthly, then we have to put 105% in there to do it monthly. Okay, so excess margin securities. You know what we got to get to in this one? Let me just get a different color highlighter here. At the end of this discussion, what I got to get you to is that 300 shares. So here's an example of a customer who bought 1,000 shares at 40. That's $40,000. And the customer, I think I've got the things here. Here's the documents, right? So, you know, open the margin account, the customer signs the credit agreement. That's where the customer says he understands he's borrowing money based on broker call. Broker call is what the bank charges the brokerage firm. Whatever the bank charges me, the brokerage firm, I'm going to charge you a little extra. The hypothecation agreement is where the customer says he understands he's pledging the securities as collateral for the loan. And that means the securities are going to be in street name, the name of the broker dealer. So when you open an account at the brokerage firm, I say, how would you like the securities to be held? Can we hold them in street name, the name of our broker dealer? Things would be operationally much easier if your securities were in street name, the name of my broker dealer. But in a margin account, you have no choice. Your securities must be held in street name. Now, that means a lot of issuers, when they look at their shareholder list, it looks like our broker dealer owns a bunch of their stock. No. What that really is the broker dealer that's holding that stock in street name for customers, either because the customer chose in a cash account to do it that way, or in a margin account because it was mandatory. And that means we're going to be, as a broker dealer, receiving all kinds of proxy materials that are being sent by the issuer to the broker dealer. And then we, the broker dealer, we're going to forward that to the customer. And one test question is, we broker dealers can't charge to forward that proxy material. More importantly, for the discussion we're having right now, that means that if you don't fulfill your responsibilities, I can sell you out. I say, listen, we have other customers who wish to establish short positions. Would it be okay to lend them your securities? And you say, well, Dean, I don't think it's in my best interest to lend people securities to establish short positions. I say it's not, and that's why it's optional. So the credit agreement's mandatory, the hypothecation agreement is mandatory, and the loan consent form is optional. So now, as I mentioned, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to the bank. So here's a customer who bought 1,000 shares at 40, and he made the required deposit. So Reg T says this customer has to come up with half of that. And so the customer is going to put up $20,000. Whoop. And we're going to lend the customer. Well, sorry about that. I got this new computer. I probably shouldn't field test it with a lecture to the YouTube channel, but we're going to make the customer put up 20 grand. And then more importantly for our discussion, we're going to lend that customer 20 grand. That's called his debit balance or his debit register. That's what he owes the brokerage firm. Now, again, I'm walking you through this, but it's not so much can you do all the math. It's can you understand when I get to the bottom of this, what this is about. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of your securities and rehypothecate to the bank. It's called Reg U, rehypothecation. So Mr. Banker is going to want $28,000 worth of securities to collateralize as collateral for this loan. So again, I'm not lending you the broker dealer's 20 grand. I'm lending you Mr. Banker's 28 grand. So I'm going to take 40 grand of the securities that you bought, and I'm going to take $28,000 to Mr. Banker. So this was a $40 stock. And so I'm going to give 700 shares of the 1,000 to Mr. Banker as collateral. I'm going to rehypothecate 700 shares. Again, low probability, but the test question, if you get it, is going to be about the 300 shares. What I have to do with those 300 shares is lock them up and segregate them, right? I'm not supposed to be using customer securities to support broker-dealer indebtedness. So this is perfectly copacetic to use customer securities to support customer indebtedness. What I'm not allowed to do is use customer securities to support broker-dealer indebtedness. So these 300 shares here have to be segregated. And what we mean by segregated is we have to lock them up for the benefit of the customer. Now, we might have to make adjustments because, if the securities go up or down, the banker might want more money. So, the test question in this example is that we have 1,000 shares to the customer bought of a $40 stock. Now, a lot of times when I'm tutoring 24s, it's been a long time since they took a 7, and maybe they're not as familiar as they used to be with margin ledger entries. On my YouTube channel, if you need to, you can dip into the 7 playlist, and there's an hour on margin there just as a review. And if you feel like that's something that's worth an hour of your time, I highly recommend it. It'll get you more squared away on some of this stuff, perhaps. This is something that's never on the 7, low probability on 24. All right, so this is, when I ask people on the test that they have to do math, usually when they say yes, they had to do math, this is the math they had to do. And it's called market value at maintenance. So be careful what you're being asked. In our example, we had bought 1,000 shares of a $40 stock, and we made the required deposit. So there was our setup. We call this setup. And so there's our setup. And what they're going to ask you on the test is how far down the stock could go before there'd be a problem. Now, a lot of times people aren't reading carefully. And be careful, I'm not asking what is maintenance on this account. Maintenance on this account right now is $10,000. And you have 20, so that's not a problem. That's not what we're asking. We're asking how far down this account could go before there would be a problem. And so you're going to take the debit register, what you owe the brokerage firm, debit register, debit balance. You're going to divide by 0.75. And when I do that, we find out that, sign of the devil. So again, if they ask us on the test, they'll say, a customer has the following margin ledger entries. Long market value, 40,000, debit of 20, equity of 20. What is market value at maintenance? And you come up with 26,666. Now they might do the same thing, for every investor who thinks this is going up, another investor is equally convinced it's going down. So instead of buying it, I sell short 8,000 shares at 40. And this is where most people get hung up, is the classical equation here. I'm going to have $60,000 in cash, not a free credit balance, a credit balance that rose from a short sale. 40 grand from selling the stock I didn't own, plus the Reg T requirement. Reg T is how much you have to initially deposit. So you have to be at risk initially for that. And then you got 40 grand from selling the borrowed stock. And that's where this 60 grand came from. Now, what you owe are securities presently valued at $40,000. And so you have equity of 20. And again, that's called the classical margin equation short. And again, I would refer you to that hour lecture if you need to go over margin, if it's been a while. Again, I don't think it's a big deal on the test. I mean, if you tell you missed the 24 because of margin, I'm going to say, what were your other problems? You had other problems. Now, the same deal on the test, they're going to ask you how far up this account could go before there'd be a problem. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to take the credit register, which in this case is 60,000. And we're going to divide by 1.3. And that will tell us market value at maintenance. That will tell us market value at maintenance. So I'm just getting clean up some space here. And let me get my calculator. 60,000 divide by 1.3. And I get 46, 153.85. So that's how far up this account could go before you would. Now, when I do debriefing, I ask people on their 24, did you have to do any math? A lot of times they said, I didn't have to do any math, which is unfortunate. But when they say they did have to do math, it's usually this, you're either gonna have to do this one or that one on your series 24. Record retention. So I wish we had more. I wish we had more mnemonics, memory aids than we do. Well, at 7, we have lots of them. 24, not so much. But SPAM stands for, if Schwab was started in 1975, for example. So since 1975, lifetime of Schwab, we need the stock certificates, the ownership of Schwab, not the stock of the customer, the ownership of Schwab, to make sure there's nobody involved in the broker dealer who's been barred. Now, if the broker dealer isn't organized as a corporation, but rather is organized as a partnership, then we need the partnership agreement. So the S is stock certificates, owners, partners, owners, right? Stock certificates or partnership agreement. Who are the partners? Who are the owners? And then A is articles of incorporation, articles of incorporation. And M is minutes of the directors' meetings. Sometimes we come up with some great rules based on the minutes of the directors' meetings. We say, where was there a fork of the road? And they took the road less traveled, right? So S, stock certificates, P, partnership agreement, A, articles of incorporation, M, minutes of directors' meetings. Again, on these lectures, remember, there's always a pause button. You can always hit the pause and rewind and do it. I'll probably a little bit before I timestamp this, because that takes me a little longer to get these things timestamped. But that's the other way you can find things within the lectures with the timestamps. All right, so I think the 6-year records is items of original entry. You could fake this stuff, but it would be a little harder for you to come up with this stuff and fake it. Easy to fake, for example, Madoff faking account statements. Items of original entry would be a little harder, but a lot of them stocks that came in and out, we bought and sold each day. We joke, but the order department, once the order department transmits the order to the appropriate market center for execution, then it comes back to the purchase and sales departments. That's the blotters of the stocks we bought and sold each day for our own account and for our customers. That would be hard to fake. General ledger, you could fake that, but that again would require a little bit more ingenuity. The stock record, now we do mean the stock of the customers coming in out of the firm. Customer ledger, customer statements make sense, because arbitration is 6 years and it makes sense to keep things for 6 years. We don't want to go into an arbitration case and we don't have records. The thing that makes you a 24 is a 6-year record. Written complaints are 4. Everything else is 3. Everything else is 3. So if you have to guess, I don't want you to guess, but if you have to guess, 3 is not a bad guess. We require Fidelity bonding. All employees are fingerprinted, are covered by the Fidelity bond. The amount of that Fidelity bond is based on the firm's net capital. And you have to review it annually. We have to appoint an anti-money laundering officer. We have to conduct an AML test annually. And in the written supervisory procedures of the broker-dealer, there has to be something about anti-money laundering. Woohoo! I'm getting a little better. I think that came in at about 45 minutes. So I'll be putting this up on the channel shortly, and that will be our second. The next installment will be banking, corporate finance. The 3 areas, when I lose somebody on 24, very rarely do I lose somebody. If I'm doing like a 20-person 24 class and I lose somebody, usually what they have in common is they're a packaged product person. They're a mutual fund person. And, they never have done like general security stuff. And so this fiscal responsibility, net capital stuff, trading, banking. And so that's the first things I'm trying to take care of in terms of the playlist. I have a trading thing up there for you folks who are packaged product for folks. And now I've got a fiscal responsibility. Next will be corporate finance. At that point, I'll probably circle back and start doing the test explication of the content outline. Will probably be our next step. And then I'll add as we go. But, the big part, good news, if you are one of those people who are a packaged product retail person, remember, a lot of it is babysitting sevens with, retail communication and what brokers can't do. That'll probably be a little while before I get that up for you. So Again, I also have an R Series 24 community. You can remain anonymous. I'm not on there, but I don't know what the audience. I had a request to start that group, and it was somebody matriculating 24. There's no a place for 24s really test takers, so we'll see how that develops. Like I said, I think there's 14 of us thus far, so but we only been at it a couple of weeks, so we'll see. I know that over the internet there's been dormant sites, so I'm teaching at 24. If you're watching this on, I'm coming to you early November, and I'll be teaching a Series 24 class. You'd like to join me for a couple of days, but I'm thinking when I teach those classes that I can push the people to the our Series 7 community. I usually say test subject matter expert in the R Series 7, but I didn't do that 24 because we're peers. That's a peer community for 24. So I don't consider myself to be anything other than your peer in that group. But I'm there to help. If you need help, I'm there for you. Okay. Like, share, subscribe for the channel if you're a would-be 24. Like I say, we have lots of help for your SIEs, lots of help for your Series 7s, and lots of helps for your 63, 65, 66s. We appreciate referrals to the channel. They just find their playlist, and all that good stuff will be in there. That we have in the Series 7s primary, about 50% of the channel, but there's over 30, 40 hours of Series 7 lectures and practice exams for your Series 7s. So we appreciate it. And like I say, I'll see you on the next time.